Tanzania unknowingly got a dictator for president. Could this mark the instability of one of the most peaceful countries in East Africa? This is an explosive and deeply troubling question we are going to be confronting tonight. For decades, Tanzania was just a peaceful nation. It was the benchmark of stability in a turbulent region of East Africa. A 2020 Global Peace Index ranked Tanzania in the top 5 most peaceful countries in sub-Saharan Africa, a statement to the legacy of ujamaa and the pragmatic diplomacy of Julius Nyerere. But peace, as we are learning, is not a permanent state. It is a delicate construct, and the events of last few years, culminating in the seismic shock of the October 2025 recently concluded election, suggests that this construct is now under severe, perhaps existential threat. We are here to perform a political autopsy on the crisis, to track the journey of President Samia Suluhu Hassan from a seemingly conciliatory leader to a figure whose government is now accused of orchestrating one of the most controversial electoral victories in modern African history. A victory so absolute that it echoes the darkest chapters of authoritarian rule. To understand the precipitous decline, we must first go back to the beginning. Samia Suluhu Hassan did not come to power through a direct electoral mandate. Her ascent was constitutional following the tragic death and unexpected death of her predecessor, the iron-fisted John Pombe Magufuli, in March of 2021. We all remember that. She emerged from the complex political landscape of Zanzibar, a career politician with long-ruling Chama cha Mapinduzi CAM party, a system described by scholars as soft authoritarian state since its single-party origins. Her selection as Magufuli's vice presidential candidate in 2015 was seen as a strategic balance to his bulldozer persona. She was the quiet, composed, and loyal deputy from the islands, placating regional tensions. For 5 years, she stood by as Magufuli's administration systematically dismantled democratic institutions. Under Magufuli, Tanzania plummeted into global freedom rankings. Reporters Without Borders noted Tanzania fell over 50 places on the World Press Freedom Index during his tenure. Media outlets like The Citizen, the Mseto were suspended, and opposition leaders were routinely arrested, with the most prominent, Tindu Lissu, surviving an assassination attempt in 2017 involving 16 bullets. Through it all, Samia's own beliefs were masked by a veil of unwavering loyalty, a classic survival tactic in a patriarchal and two-party system. When she took the oath of office in 2021, a wave of relief as Samia Spring swept across the nation and the international community. She spoke of reopening banned media outlets, of engaging in dialogue with the opposition, of a new era of economic pragmatism. She acknowledged the COVID-19 pandemic Magufuli had downplayed, seeking vaccines and international partnership. The World Bank, the IMF, once frozen out, re-engaged. For a moment, it seemed the bulldozer's era was over, replaced by a more gentle, conscious-building leader, Samia Suluhu Hassan. But that spring, now we see, was a mirage. Beneath the softer rhetoric, The machinery of the authoritarian state was not dismantled, it was merely repurposed. The oppressive laws, the Cyber Crimes Act, the Media Service Act remained on the books. The powerful and uncountable security services retained the structure and leadership. The absolute dominance of Chama cha Mapinduzi, which has held power since independence, persisted. The veneer was new, but the foundation was the same. It was the difference between Yoweri Kaguta Museveni giving a conciliatory speech, the actual structure of the national resistance movement that keeps him in power, the system endured. And this brings us to the pivotal catastrophic event, the general elections held on October 29th of 2025 that she won with 98.6%. The official result was a number that defies political gravity and historical precedent, 98.6%. The President Samia Suluhu Hassan was declared the winner with that percentage of the vote. Let's put this in a context. In the last competitive election in 2015, Magufuli won by 58%. To jump to 98.6 is not victory. This is statistically absurdity. It is a number that belongs not to the democracy but to the playbook of totalitarian regimes. It is a figure that places her in the company of leaders like Syria's Bashar al-Assad, who routinely wins referendums with 98%, 99% of the vote. Or the Paul Biya of Cameroon, who just recently won an election amidst protests, and he always posts similar numbers. In East Africa, it evokes the ghost of Daniel Arap Moi's single party Mlolongo queuing voting system in Kenya, where 99% results were the norm. It is a red flag signaling the complete and total death of credible electoral contest. The opposition, led by fiery and resilient Tindu Lissu, immediately rejected the result, alleging mass rigging, voter intimidation, the electoral fraud on industrial scale. The Tanzanians Electoral Watch, a coalition by the civil society groups, much as they could not come out openly, but reported undertone massive pre-ticked ballots, the expulsion of polling agents, and internet throttling that made independent verification impossible. But of course, they could not come out to, say it, fearing the consequences of the regime. And then the people spoke in the only way that they knew that was left to them. They poured in the streets in protests that rocked Dar es Salaam, Arusha, Mwanza, and Mbeya. But the state's response was not one of the government confident of its own legitimacy. It was a no-nonsense crackdown of terrifying and unprecedented proportions. We've seen the videos, security forces, notably the field force unit, going at people in the crowds, dispersing them fiercely. The Tanzanian Human Rights Defenders Coalition documented at least 47 fatalities and over 1,200 arrests in just a week following the election. The level of violence has been described as, a systemic and brutal campaign to instill terror, more severe in its immediate intensity than the post-election crackdown we've seen in Uganda in 2021 or the long-term suppression in Ethiopia. This crackdown is part of a broader intensifying pattern of political persecution. Look no further than treatment of Tindu Lissu. Of course, they have come out to challenge the result. He wasn't engaged in the dialogue. His team has not been engaged in the dialogue. He was literally voted in absentia, in incarceration, and on charges of political offenses. I mean, capital political offenses. Now, this is a classic tool of an authoritarian regime, straight from the playbook, you may say. It is what we've seen with the likes of the people that they call dictators in the region, effectively neutralizing the most potent political threats by transforming them into the candidates of convict. But then, the net of paranoia extends far beyond the border. The arrest and deportation of prominent human activists from Uganda, you remember, and then another one from Kenya, is all an expression of a government that is not in charge per se. This is a state operating in shadows, afraid of light, mirroring the isolationist tendencies of Eritrea's Isaias Afwerki. It is deliberate veering from the regional human rights ecosystem. So we return to our central, terrifying question. Does this mark the beginning of instability of once a peaceful nation of Tanzania that everyone has been proud of? The evidence is overwhelming and paints a grim picture. When you take away the ballot, when you respond to the peaceful protest with brutal force, then when you jail your opponents on trumped-up generational resentment, the social fabric woven by Julius Nyerere is tearing. The young population of over 60% of the nation under 25 facing a future with no political voice and diminishing economic hope. Youth unemployment remains stubbornly high, and they are steadily losing its fear. And a populace that no longer fears its government is a populace that can become dangerously unpredictable. We have seen movies before in that region. The slow burn in Uganda that erupted into violent protests every electoral cycle, the decades of instability in Burundi under Nkurunziza, and then issues in South Sudan, issues in Rwanda, literally in Kenya, literally across the region. Tanzania is at crossroads, more perilous than any since its union was formed. The title, the most peaceful country in East Africa, is no longer the current reality, but a haunting memory, a relic of a bygone era. The Samia Suluhu Hassan, who promised spring, has delivered a winter of discontent and tools she is using to enforce that winter. The 98% of victory, the treason charges, the brutal crackdowns are the very signatures of dictators she was once contrasted against. The nation is now on a knife's edge, and the actions taken today will determine whether it plunges into the kind of prolonged instability that it has plagued its neighbors, or finds a near miraculous way back from the brink. The world must watch, and it must not look away. The anchors of East African stability is dragging, and the consequences of the nation, the entire region, are unimaginable. It could spill from Tanzania and then to other neighboring countries, like we see the Gen Zs of Kenya, predicting that from Tanzania, Uganda is next and then Kenya is next, that it will not leave President Yoweri Museveni, neither will it spare William Ruto. It is not a direction that we want to see the region taking, but rather a unified region that is peaceful. But if we see such things happening, such issues are raising, political persecutions, and uncouth electoral processes, then it leaves the entire region at a brink of disaster.